Happy Halloween, everybody, and welcome to another great episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. Once again, with your favorite host, the one and only Cave Cat. With the spooky season upon us, I thought that today's episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews would be appropriate for the occasion. The reason is because the show that I'll be reviewing for episode 34 is none other than Gravedale High. So, what is Gravedale High, you ask? Well, it's an animated series produced by Hanna-Barbera that aired on the Saturday morning schedule on NBC back in 1990, and it's about a young man named Max Schneider who becomes the teacher for a high school. However, the big kicker of the series is that it's not just any high school, but rather a high school for different monsters, a lot of them being based off of famous movie monsters. This show is actually a little bit similar to that of Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, which I briefly mentioned in my Scooby-Doo review back in January, being that that film also featured a school for monsters. However, one difference between the show and Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School is that while the latter has monster characters that interact with Shaggy, Scooby, and Scrappy, the monsters are actually female, whereas this show has monster characters that are both male and female, but the basic premise is still the same as that of Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School. Also, one thing to know about this series, this is actually one of the very first animated Saturday morning cartoons to feature a celebrity actor voicing the main character, following Camp Candy, which starred John Candy, and The Completely Mental Misadventures of Ed Grimley, which starred Martin Short. For this show, the voice of Max Schneider was provided by none other than Rick Moranis, best known for starring in such films as Strange Brew, the Ghostbusters films, Little Shop of Horrors, Spaceballs, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and its sequels, and several others. I have to say that it was really innovative at the time for a Saturday morning animated series to have a celebrity actor voice the main character, whether the character has the same name as that of the actor playing him or her, or has a different name. Nowadays, if a celebrity actor voices a main character in an animated series, odds are that's mainly an adult animated series. But let's get on with the actual show itself. As explained before, the show follows the adventures of Max Schneider, the human teacher of a classroom full of rowdy monster students at Gravedale High. And unlike other fish out of water protagonists, Max actually proves himself quite capable and adept at keeping his students in line, even in spite of the fact that they sometimes don't always grasp his lessons. And as for his students, they consist of Benny Stoker, Frankentyke, Reggie Moonshroud, Gil Waterman, Cleopatra, Doozer, Blanche, Sid, and J.P. Ghastly. And each of them have their own personalities that really make them stand out in their own ways. Benny is basically the Fonz of the group, being that he's calm, cool, collected, yet is often late to class and doesn't really show any interest in schoolwork unless it benefits his best interests. Despite this, he can actually apply himself in his studies if the occasion happens to present itself. Frankentyke, despite being the shortest of the main students, is the biggest troublemaker of them all, in almost a similar vein as that of either Bart Simpson or even Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes. But despite this, he can prove himself to be helpful to the other students, and especially to Max. As mentioned before in my reviews of Adventures from the Book of Virtues, The Real Ghostbusters, and especially Scooby-Doo, Frank Welker really did an amazing job voicing Frankentyke, giving him that believable spoiled brat energy. Reggie is the nerd of the group, despite being a werewolf, that he often comes across as being somewhat awkward yet very intelligent, so he's basically the brains of the group, which often comes in handy for the other students. Gil is the stereotypical surfer dude, which makes sense since he's supposed to be based off of the creature from the Black Lagoon, even speaking in surfer lingo. Cleopatra, or Cleo for short as her name implies, is the antithesis of the usual depiction of mummies, being rather obese, but is also the friendliest of the main students. Doozer is the valley girl Gorgon, who has a habit of priding herself on her appearance and vanity. Blanche is a zombie who likes to go shopping, but is also talented in sewing and cooking. Sid is the class clown of the group, despite being based off of the Invisible Man, even being skilled in doing various impressions, though it's no surprise that his name was taken from comedian Sid Caesar. And finally, JP is the standard rich kid, who is also a parody of Peter Lorre, being that he looks and sounds like him too, which is pretty hilarious. We also get other characters in the show, such as Headmistress Crone, the headmistress of the school, Mr. Boneyard, the quote-unquote bus driver, Coach Cadaver, the gym teacher who has an immense hatred for Max, Sal Monella, the school's cafeteria chef, Mr. Tutner, the school's history teacher with excruciatingly bad breath, and many other characters. And as for the show itself, well, at the time that it was announced and started airing on NBC on Saturday mornings, a lot of people didn't like the show all that much. While they liked the concept of a school for monsters, they didn't like the animation style, they didn't like how the characters seemed to be one note, and they especially didn't like how the show seemed to be rather cliched with a lot of stereotypical high school tropes. And yeah, the show did seem rather mediocre. But then again, it's no surprise that it had to compete against Tiny Toon Adventures, which also first premiered in 1990 and also focused on a school for a younger generation of classic characters. With this show, it's movie monsters, and with Tiny Toons, it's classic Looney Tunes characters. In the end, it was Tiny Toon Adventures that won out and got more seasons, while Gravedale High ended up getting left in the dust. But even in spite of how mediocre this show was that led to it becoming obscure, it actually proved popular enough to get its own line of Happy Meal toys at McDonald's, having toys of Benny, Frankentyke, Cleopatra, and Sid. In fact, the only semblance of awareness that I had with the show at a young age at the time was the fact that I had the Happy Meal toys of Frankentyke and Cleopatra, and I didn't find out about the show until 2002, when my mom had begun ordering various Happy Meal toys that we did not have at the time. But yeah, even though Gravedale High actually was picked to have Happy Meal toys for McDonald's, it still did not save the show from getting cancelled due to its rather lackluster premise and rather poor execution of an admittedly awesome concept. I actually watched quite a number of episodes in preparation for this review, and I could tell you that while I do enjoy the fact that the premise tries to play off of that of Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, it doesn't quite meet with the expectations of that of the latter. Getting off topic for a moment here, but originally the Ghoul Girls from Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School were slated to get their own spin-off series, but unfortunately that plan never came to fruition, even though they would later guest star in an episode of Cartoon Network's OKKO Let's Be Heroes 3 decades later. I never saw that episode, and I have no plans on seeing OKKO Let's Be Heroes anyway. But anyway, despite the fact that I have no memory of ever seeing Gravedale High on Saturday mornings when I was younger, I was able to watch episodes of the show on YouTube to see if it really is as bad as a lot of people said it was back then. And I think it's safe to say that the show isn't really bad, it's just mediocre, as I said before. So I think it's also safe to say that this show gets 7 stars. Despite the mediocrity of the show, it did actually pave the way for other animated shows based around the concept of a school for monsters, ranging from Monster High, Casper's Scare School, Super Monsters, and even the anime series Monster Musume. Not to mention that there's also Nickelodeon's Ah, Real Monsters, which also revolves around a school for monsters, albeit located in a junkyard. But even so, there are still a lot of people out there that don't hold Gravedale High with very much regard, mainly due to the poorly executed premise of a human teacher in an all-monster school, as well as the fact that it tried to ride on the coattails of Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School. This might be one of the reasons why Saturday morning cartoons on NBC had begun to decline in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, before finally getting the axe in 1992. The fact that NBC had also produced and introduced Saved by the Bell at the time might have also been a big factor to play in the death of Saturday morning cartoons on NBC. And though Gravedale High failed big time in trying to appeal to younger and older audiences alike, at least it's gained a cult following despite its flaws, and that should count for something. Well, anyway, that about wraps it up for this episode of Cave Cat's movie and TV reviews. Like before, if you really enjoy my videos, then be sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more episodes or more videos from me. And once again, I wish you all a happy Halloween. So until next time, later!